Um, so Last week, the lecture turned out to be like 2 hours long, so it's gonna be a lot shorter. I have a lot less slides and do less talking. So let's quickly go over what we went over last time. So we looked at the examples of like how the technologies that we've been talking about, for instance, artificial intelligence and blockchain, and robotics, how they are being implemented in our society. And we looked at the private, how it's implemented in private industry and also in the public sector, like in the governments, and we've seen that this is just something that can revolutionize not just the well-developed countries, but also underdeveloped countries. And then we moved on to looking at labor market, like what's going to happen if these technologies are actually applied in our society and it's being implemented. We learned about the technological unemployment, which has two components. One is job destruction effect, um, because like old industries are replaced by the technology and it's being automated. And also there's another effect, which is job creation effect, because with a new technology, people are freed up from doing something that can be automated. So they can do something else more in the creative um, uh, parts of their work. And as a result, like starting from 2000, we've seen like humans are losing in the technology versus education race. And we've seen that labor force participation has been steadily decreasing. And if you look at it in the global level, it's even more pronounced. And what I think should come next is something that we've seen in the past, but due to every time there was automation, there are people, like large chunk of people, who are unable to adapt to the new technology. So there are always people who are left over. So as a result, there's a huge inequality that always exists, and it happened over time, and we're going to see that the trends today. So before we get into it, I want to clear some common misconceptions about inequality. So first is to thinking that inequality is a byproduct of capitalism, but actually it's not. So inequality is something that is just is a result of human nature. Like as we cooperate in our society, and as we cooperate as a civilization, there's always a hierarchy. We form hierarchies, and we know that even socialism is very hierarchical, and it creates a lot of inequality. And there are different forms of inequality depending on what kind of like political system and how well it's doing. For instance, like monarchy, monarchy, it's divided into class instead of money. Now it's money because of capitalism, but back then it was status, right? Like if you're a king, you definitely live in a better living standards than peasants. And even socialistic countries, it's the same. Like the dictator and his like military officers, if you think about like North Korea, they're very well off, when the bottom like 99.9% of the population is living in like poverty, absolute poverty. And second, inequality in and of itself is bad. It can't. It's sort of not completely true, because inequality sometimes motivates people to work better. For instance, think about it this way: like if you don't have to work, but then you always receive money, and what do you think is going to be like your behavior? You're going to be less inclined to work. You will be less motivated to put yourself in the labor market. And having a little bit of inequality, or like fair amount of inequality, actually helps people to become more productive, people to innovate, and people to invest in the future assets. Third, solution. This is something that I realize a lot. Like all three of them, of course, but especially this, like especially among college students. But we often think the solution to inequality is to pursue equality of outcome. Um, does anyone know like the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity? Can someone jump in and You can use this picture if you want.
Yeah, so equality in opportunities that everyone begins from a same starting point. The outcome will be different depending on your ability or environment, opportunity, and so on.
Mhm.
But quality of outcome is that it's like giving away the participation medal, no matter how you done it, when you started, or what you did.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So that's exactly right. So so equality of outcome is such that like it doesn't matter where you start. Like everyone can start whatever, but everyone has to finish at the end at the same time. Everyone has to reach the finish goal at the same time. What equality of opportunity I guess pursues is for people like they start at the same place. They start, but then depending on their ability, how hard they work and stuff like that, your prize will be different. And I just want to point out that equality of outcome is not only undesirable, but also it's impossible. Because think about it this way, like this is actually becoming more and more prevalent in our like government structures too. In Canada, what they try to do was equalize government job opportunities for women and men equally. Like so, 50% of all the government jobs must be from women because nearly like our society is 50% men and 50% women. But that's actually isn't equality of outcome. That's pursuing equality of outcome because even among men, like we're so different. Like everyone is very, very different. Even among men, like with different age, with different race, with different education background, with different so many different aspects that it's impossible for us to equalize the outcome of every single individual. Okay, so is there any question in the misconceptions? If not, I'll go to the next. So the question that this is a hot topic, especially in the economics field, but I won't get into like concepts of economics, but I just want to share with you like the trends of what's been happening. So it's not rocket science. It's very simple. Like there are many graphs, but there has been a steady divergence of income. So this is top 5% of the people, like their trends of income. This top 20%. This is top second 20%, third 20%, fourth, and bottom 20. Like it's in quintiles. And we see that many, like 60% or more like 80% of the income groups are very steady over time since 1960 to 2015. However, we see a steady growth in top 20% and pronounced growth in top 5%. So what happens then? Like if you have more, so let's say like you earn $30,000 in New York, which is very, very little for a family of four. Like let's say like $30,000 and you spend in rent, food, automobile, like gas, car insurance, like all kinds of those things. And after that, leftover is probably you don't have any money left over, but what's left over is credit card debt instead, right? But then for people who have more wealth and especially or more income, and if you have more income, the share of your income that you spend on food or your rent or other essentials in life is very much lower than people who are at the bottom percentage or bottom, I guess, quintiles. Okay, so that's why you see these differences in savings rate. Like savings rate in bottom 90%, like from 1975 to 2010, is like zero, like on average. Like they barely save. Sometimes they even like get on debt. Like, and this is 90% of all the population in America. So, and however, on the contrary, what you see is like top 1% savings rate and also top 10 to 1% people who in income distribution, how they save. Like you see, it slightly decreases here in 1920, and it's like Gilded Age, but it's still 10%. It goes up. Like obviously that's because like their income has been growing. More income, you have more resistance to shocks. You have more money to save for the future, right? So therefore savings rate is very different depending on the income distribution, and as a result, your wealth, which is how much you save. Like, just think of it that way: how much you save and how much you have, like as an asset. Like that wealth shares is going to be different as well. Like you see the top 10, like top 1%er, like it's like U-shaped. So what tells me is that starting from 1978, when the third industrial revolution started to really take a rapid pace, they have been garnering a lot of wealth because they saved more. In the previous picture, they saved more. So what happens if you save more? You have more wealth, and if you have more wealth, it gives you more income because there are capital gains to your wealth. But if you break it even more among the top 1%ers, and you look at top 1%ers and top 0.1%, and you only look at top 0.1%, you look at it and top 1% to 0.1%, they're pretty steady in terms of wealth shares. It hasn't grown that much. But if you look at top 0.1%ers, they have been growing like very quickly. What that tells you is the richest of the rich, are benefiting from this technology and also globalization. And yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to convey here, even though there are a lot of graphs. But is there any questions so far?
What about the changes in the bottom 1%?
Bottom 1%?
Yeah.
Bottom 1% is so low that we don't even like count it. So this is all in proportion. So if you think about it this way, like if top 0.1% has been growing, that means because this is in proportion, bottom 99.9% wealth share has been decreasing steadily, proportional to this increase. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there, I read an article where the wealth share of bottom 50% combined is only 10% or 20% of the entire wealth shares, while top 1%ers already have 20%, or not even top 1%, 0.1%ers, they already garner 20% of the entire wealth. So combined together, top 1%ers, it's about 50%. So top 1%ers have basically half of the entire nation's wealth. So when we said like it's not the inequality that in and of itself is bad, it's access inequality that is bad. Why? It's in the next slides, because access inequality is correlated to a lot of bad things that we see in the society. For instance, obesity, drug use, criminal activities, and homelessness, depression, and also I don't know why this is cut off, but this is life expectancy. But life expectancy among the more unequal countries are shown to have less, or they live less, basically, in those societies. And in more unequal societies, people commit more crimes because it's not really the absolute poverty that causes people to commit crime, at least like what the data shows. It's the relative inequality. So it doesn't matter how wealthy your nation as a whole is. It depends on like how much wealth you have based on compared to your neighbor. So if your neighbor is like I guess like 10,000 times richer than you are, instead of like only like 10 times richer, then it's more, in those countries, it's more likely that people will commit crime. So that's basically why access inequality is a problem. So as a result, there is a human effort to solve all these problems. So we don't want, as a society, to have increased access inequality, increased crime rate. We don't want people to become more obese. We don't want people to become depressed. So as a result, and as a result of technological unemployment, we're seeing this universal basic income as a solution to solve these problems. So I want to quickly watch a video of an ex-presidential candidate. Like, he's not even in I'm not talking about like a professor. I'm not talking about some like a business person or some just random guy, but he was a presidential candidate, and this universal basic income was his main agenda. So let's quickly watch what it is. It's a quick video. Can you guys hear?
Guaranteed universal income. Explain.
Okay.
Guaranteed universal income. Explain what that is.
Yeah, so it's a very old idea. The idea is that
as old as Sir Thomas More, I have read.
Yeah, no, it goes back even before the founding of the country. So it's an idea where every citizen of a society gets a certain amount of money or resources free and clear to do whatever you want to meet your basic
regardless
needs.
Of your income.
Regardless of your income. So Thomas Paine called it the citizen's dividend and was for it at the founding of the country. Martin Luther King called it a guaranteed minimum income in the 60s. Milton Friedman called it a negative income tax and it had the support of 1,000 economists in the 70s. And it even
Richard Nixon seriously considered it.
Yeah, it passed
and it was debated in Congress.
It passed the House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Nixon. And one state has actually passed something virtually identical, which is the petroleum dividend of Alaska. Where everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. Doesn't matter you're working, not working, income doesn't matter. And in Alaska, it has created thousands of jobs, it's improved children's health, it's decreased income inequality, and it's wildly popular in a very conservative state.
So that's that.
Guaranteed universal.
So what is basically universal basic income is basically government is giving free money to every single citizen, regardless of their income or work status. It doesn't matter whether you're working or not working, whether you have a job or not. But it depends on two main assumptions. First is that it must be high enough to ensure economic existence for all the citizens. And also it has to be unconditional. So that's why it has this condition right here, regardless of income or work status. And as Andrew Yang has mentioned, this is something that is not a recent idea. It's been discussed like ever since like Thomas Paine. Like he was an author of Utopia. So Utopia, as you see it, like it's a heavenly place. It's a man-made heavenly place. And as he was envisioning it, he proposed that everyone should be given this divine dividend to every single citizen so that they can live with guaranteed income. And Martin Luther King, Milton Friedman. So this is something important because he's an economist, Nobel laureate economist, but he is a conservative. Like you think of universal basic income and you think of it as like, oh, this is a very socialist idea. But even a conservative libertarian, these people are although like he proposed something different, which was called negative income tax, but it's similar in idea. And whether it's like whether you're a conservative or whether you're a liberal, we see that as technological unemployment and the fourth industrial revolution is rapidly taking place, we are toying with this idea of universal basic income because it seems inevitable. And it's not just these like people in academia, authors, or like a civil rights movement, but also like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and his co-founder Tim Hughes. Like they're big proponents of universal basic income, saying that technological advancements will displace a lot of workers. Like last lecture, we learned that it's going to replace about 40% of our labor. So people who are in between will be lost and without knowing how to adapt to the new environment. And in order to cope with that, government is going to take care of these people who are lost and dependent, and government will pay them $1,200. So let's quickly discuss about pros and cons before we actually see the slide.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be like a political like debate or something.
Yeah.
But early on in the lecture, you mentioned the inequality is kind of relative,
Right.
right? So the rich people get richer no matter what, right? So let's say I am a regular person and my neighbor earns 10,000 times more than me, then there's an inequality. How is adding like $1,000 or $2,000 more for me is gonna change that inequality? Because my neighbor is just gonna become like 12,000 times richer, something like that.
Yeah, that's a good question, because the universal basic income gives you or $1,000 regardless of your income. So even people who are 10,000 times richer than you will be getting the money. So you're not really changing any relative inequality, right?
Yeah, the only thing you change is that I can now pay my bill and I can, try something else.
That's right.
But the inequality is still there, right?
Inequality is definitely there, but in some pilot studies, we will discuss this, but in some pilot studies, it is proven to reduce inequality. And also, I think this main, I guess, agenda that people have in mind is for people to have guaranteed income, which means like enough money so that they can pay bills and, do some more creative things or stuff like that. So people who are in like absolute poverty, they're trying to reduce absolute poverty, basically. People who are under the poverty trap. So whether it will actually have effect in reducing inequality, that's questionable, and that's why it's a good question.
I also have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do they determine what is high enough income, guaranteed income for everyone?
That's also a very good question, because $1,200, like, how do you know if that's enough money for people to continue their living? And what if the prices increase? Like, what are you going to do then? And yeah, so they say, like, in universal basic income that has been proposed in many cases are usually 1,000 to 2,000, and some of them are even lower. So yeah, so there's no criteria in terms of like really deciding exact amount, like, oh, this is the amount exactly high enough to ensure all economic existence. You can think of it as like a target. Or if anyone else has any idea, please pitch in.
Hey, just a couple of questions and thoughts. Like if you look at history, normally what's happened is about every 80 years, there's typically some type of reset where the income inequality gets reset. Mm-hmm. So the last time it happened was during the Great Depression. The time before that was during the Civil War, where it's almost like in the Bible when it talks about there being a year of Jubilee every 7 years where all debts are erased and people can come start all over again. I agree with David. Unless there's like other like public policy initiatives, it's going to be hard to change that. But I guess my question is a lot of times the income inequality results because there may be structural issues within the government or the world or society that prevent certain people from getting ahead. I do think that exists. But at other times, going back to that race picture that you showed, the best structure is providing the same opportunities or as same as possible. But then some people will run faster, some will run slower, some will decide to just sit there. And so if we give $2,000 a month to each person, how do we ensure that they use that for rent and sustaining basic needs, and not go out and buy a new like 50-inch like TV or spend it on other modes of consumption? Because I feel like this universal basic income, I completely understand the rationale for it, but it doesn't seem like it's actually addressing something that might be a bit like deeper and much more core. Number one. So that's the first question. The second one is during your research of this, $2,000 a month to each American would be $360 billion a month, $7.2 trillion a year that we would add to the government's deficit. The Fed's balance sheet right now is just under 7 trillion, so we'd basically be doubling it.
Yeah.
What are there any economic impacts that you saw that could potentially arise by looking at this?
Yeah, definitely. Because I've read through some of the. So I'm gonna address your second point first. So as I've read through like some of the proposals as to how they're going to finance it, like just do a simple math. Like there are 300 million Americans, and just giving them $2,000 a month. That's like what, $4 trillion or like $6 trillion or something.
It's 360 billion a month, and then 7.2 trillion a year.
Yeah, so that's a lot of money, and
Yep.
even during this coronavirus stimulus package, we've spent, I believe we've spent about $485 billion just to give like one month of a check to every single American, or not every single American, those who I'm talking about those who qualify. So it's gonna be very, very expensive and costly. But apparently, I don't really buy into this. But what the people are proposing is that. Especially Andrew Yang, let's see his proposal. He said if we add 10% of value added tax from like the companies when they produce it, because like we can't tax robots, we can't tax machines. So what we're going to do is we're going to tax companies, and every value added, like they're going to tax like 10 to 20%. Also, like they're going to increase the tax rates, obviously, of the richest or the top marginal tax rates and below, and make it more tax system more progressive. And apparently this is something that's financeable. This is something that can be financed. And like at the same time, there are cases that show that it's not really financially sound, because if you look at Alaska, what they do is they intended initially to give $2,000 to every single citizen, and how they're going to generate money is using the $60 billion that they have as an initial fund. It was a petroleum. It depends on the petroleum price. Okay, so if petroleum price goes down, like that they're making loss, and because of all the deficits, like the number of the amount of money that they provided to each citizen each year differed vastly, like from $300 to like $2,000. In some years, like they had to give like $300 a month because like they don't have money, right? They can't finance it. Yeah. So and one good point that I thought of as I was listening to your question was, like entitlement programs such as this, or like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these entitlement programs, once it's there, it's really hard to get rid of. Yeah. Because there are going to be no politicians who will be the ones who will be criticized. They will be scared of getting rid of these programs because of the burden, because they're scared of losing votes. Totally. But even though the funds are going into down the drain, like they're not going to step up.
Let me just respond with just two things. I agree with you. Like, yes, you need tax reform, and it's really hard to do exactly for the point that you just mentioned, because no politician wants to touch anything. Right. But if you look throughout history, U.S. history, every 80 years there's been a big crisis, whether it's a global war, a civil war, or in our case, what's going on right now, which actually gave the government tremendous power to actually enact this. Like during the Depression, they just raised tax rates and they basically redistributed that wealth. In the Civil War, it was a complete reset. And so I almost wonder if we're about to enter that period. That's the first thing. The second, I guess, kind of observation that I have is I think there's a corollary connection to this and the way we should envision what the economy of light means. And so this is something that I've been sharing with a few of you over the past 2 years, but I feel like the economy of light should not be like this. It should not be a tax on the church. So what I mean by that is, like, we just sell products to church people and they're just kind of giving offering in a different form, but we're basically taking their money and redistributing it. I feel like and that's what's going to happen. They're going to tax people and redistribute it, which is fine. But I feel like the economy of light has to be outside of the system. And even in this, a true solution should be outside of the system. But we can talk about that later.
So what Eddie is talking about is right here. So in here 1928, that's like during Gilded Age. And back then, like, wealth inequality increases like very, very steeply. And what happens is Great Depression happens and it goes down. And here, this is when the war happens, 30, like mid 1930s, Second World War. And because of that, like all the capitals in Europe, they got destroyed. And also the governments took really, really strong measures in order to equalize the country. So in the US, for example, the top marginal tax rate. So top marginal tax rate, what I mean by that is the amount of money above certain amount, what percentage of tax are we going to collect? And it reached 90%. So above, like, let's say like you earn more than, sorry, I forgot the exact number, but it's something like $150,000 or something like that. Above those amount, 90% of what you earn will be collected in taxes by the government, which is ridiculous. Think of like if let's say you work at a job and above like $5,000 you earn, like most of your income will be taken away by the government. Like, how do you think you will be incentivized to work? But things like that have happened, and that's what Eddie's mentioning. And he is posing a question whether, like, are we reaching that level right here? Like in 2013, it's even higher now. So is there going to be a reset? So I just wanted to quickly touch upon that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this economy of light definitely starts small. It starts with like small resolutions, but like outside, like coming from the outside and making it flow within. I think that's something that we definitely should envision. Also, do you guys have any pros and cons in mind with like universal basic income? I want you to remember this is a human effort in order to solve the social problems that we have. So keeping that in mind, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Let's talk about the worldly pros and cons. What the world talks about. Okay, if not, I can.
I have an idea. So I think there are like some stuff and facts that are unseen for the eye. I don't really agree that it has to be like universal, but regardless, when you give money to people that is struggling with like paying rent or debt, what you're actually doing is not giving them money, but buying time for them, and they have like leisure and like headspace to like be more creative or organize their life and start over. And I think that can have like different outcomes in each family or in each person to come up with solutions, or just like take a breath and stop and get out of like the machine or the system. To start over. And that's like unseen and in its research, but I think it can have like an impact in the way you interact with other people or you move around the world.
I agree with that point. How do you ensure, because you're absolutely right, if there's a single parent who's just struggling to pay the rent and they can't even take care of their kids or spend time and by covering their rent, it'll give them that headspace. How do you ensure that person that takes the $2,000 doesn't buy a new TV or get a brand new car and actually
buy cocaine or drugs?
Yeah, I think this whole thing is based an assumption, a very important assumption that about human nature, and I think it is basing the assumption on like if we have more leisure or if we are more comfortable, we will start to be more productive, and we will naturally seek to improve ourselves, or that's the assumption, and that's the assumption they base on, like, even spiritual state, right?
Yeah.
Say I'm a druggie, I love drugs, and I don't have a job. I can totally quit doing drugs, but and look for a job, get my life together. I can totally do that. But now I have $2,000 more free drug money. What makes that change who I am in nature? I think that's the assumption
Yeah,
they base.
I mean, look, that's at least the way I approach it from. I've had many discussions with Izzy, and I know in her heart she sees everybody as inherently good and absolutely redeemable. David, my frame is, I think most states, and even my state most days, is Genesis 3, 6, and 11. And so if that's the beginning state, all these books on utopia and all these kind of heaven on earth, these heaven that men can create here are based on this idea that we're inherently good. And if we just have that choice and are given the opportunity, we'll choose to do the right thing. It's probably the case with most people, but I don't know. It's a question that I have.
Yeah. And you've mentioned many of that. So like it's going to reduce poverty. Like people are saying, like it's going to reduce poverty rate. Like as Izzy mentioned, I'm sure there are people who will use it wisely. Like we can't really say like everyone's gonna use it for like in bad stuff. So like I guess in many cases, like people who, I'm not talking about people who are like permanently impoverished, but people who are temporarily impoverished. Those people, maybe it could help them get out of the poverty rate, right? And try to look for a job and stuff like that. But David and Eddie also, that point is very correct, because people who are permanently impoverished, there's a reason. There's something deeper. The reason, there's a deeper reason why they're permanently impoverished. Yes, we could blame our family. Yes, we could blame our background. We can blame our IQ, whatever. But this country, at least in my opinion, the US, it's not perfect, definitely, but it's the country that provides you the most opportunity. If you strive, then you can get out of impoverished state. But these people, their spiritual state is so destroyed that it's really difficult for them to get out. There was this speaker who said there are only 3 things you need to do in order to get out of impoverished state. First, don't get pregnant before marriage. 2, graduate high school. 3, don't commit crime. These 3 things. As long as you do these 3, you won't be impoverished. But people do make choices that are quite not rational. But as Izzy definitely has a point, because like not everyone's like that, and there will be people who will be benefited from this, right?
I can add 1 point to Izzy, probably on the supporting side. People are saying that because they're not having enough basic income, they have parents will have 2 to 3 jobs, right? So they won't spend enough time with their kids. Therefore, the something deeper level is the kids won't have the connection with their family, and they start going all over the place and be bad or something like that. And just by providing $2,000 to those parents, they can reduce the 2-3 jobs a day, and then they can spend more time with their family and read storybooks and make sure that their kids is growing up healthy and be more the better. This is the deeper level I think the other side is saying, which I think also kind of makes sense, but again, not applied to everybody.
Yeah.
I have also something that I can add to that, and I think it also kind of speaks to the incentive to work. argument. I had to give presentation on this when I was in undergrad, and I took family policy class. And one argument was that targeted, what about people who use it badly, incorrectly? And the argument against that was, like, even like for food stamps or like these free things that government gives out to people, there still are people who use it with a bad intent, and that's not very helpful to them. But the argument was the percentage is not significant. The percentage of people who misuse those opportunities are significantly low, and there's a much greater percentage where who actually benefits from this. And also another argument was towards incentive to work. Is right now people have to work for things that they don't enjoy because they have to, because they don't have leisure to search for and try out what they actually enjoy. But if they have that leisure to actually do what they want to do, then it'll give them the incentive to work, because they're not just forced to do it to make money, but they're actually doing it because they want to do it.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good point. And to your point, the reason why we're trying to implement this in the first place is because there are no jobs, or there will be a lot of jobs that will disappear and people will not be able to work. That's why we want this, right? But one thing that I also want to pose is that we've actually tried similar thing in the 20th century. So what this basically giving free money, it means that, hey, like you have a cushion. Government will provide you a cushion. So even if you don't find work, and even if you don't make your living, make a sustainable living, we'll provide you a safety net so that it's okay. And similar thing happened in Soviet Union as well. Like no matter what kind of work you do, doesn't matter. Like you're gonna get paid the same. As long as you're a laborer, you're gonna be paid equal amount. And you won't own any production factors. And that's basically what happened. And we've seen 6 million people died from hunger because of lack of incentive to work. So 50%, let's say like 50% of the jobs disappear, but there are still another 50% of the jobs that will be still available. And the question is whether this universal basic income will influence people's labor supply decisions. Like whether, will it change how much they work? Will it change how much they try in order to be productive? So things like this are a very good question that we will see to be answered when this is actually implemented. So, this is so in order to see what the impacts of these will be, whether it will be like feasible or not. Like it has been, a lot of pilot studies have been done like all throughout the world. India, like in the United States, I've mentioned Alaska. Here, like Stockton in California, Oakland, like I think Chicago is trying to do it as well. Canada, a lot of European nations like Finland and stuff, and in South Africa, like and Brazil as well. So in many countries, it's happened. And what the one thing that and there have been found a lot of good results. I'm going to tell you that, like a lot of like life expectancy increases, reduced crime and stuff like that. And job like employment level hasn't changed. Like the labor supply level hasn't changed, which was the central argument against UBI. But one thing that we should remember is that most of these UBI pilot studies were time limited. There was a time limit. So in 1 year or 2 years, the program will end. Therefore, you have to strive to like find work. Because like once you're done receiving this like universal basic income, like there will be no income. So you have to find work between those time periods. So people had to strive to find work. So employment wise, like the labor supply decision is not really quite clear, and it's still questionable. And in Finland, that's the point I was trying to make. Like there was a video about like, universal basic income that took place in Finland, and they gave like 560 euros per month, and they gave them for like a year, and they highlighted like couple participants of this program, and some of them did get a really good job, like did like really use the money and the time in order to make themselves a better person, like be educated and stuff like that, and they landed a high paying job. But also that proportion is not only the proportion is like small, but also like there was a time limit. So that's the point I was trying to make. And another like pros of this like whole UBI is that it can get rid of all the existing government bureaucracies that are very inefficient, basically, like unemployment compensation, EITC, which is like a tax credit that is given for people who are in the lower income ends, and like temporary assistance, and all these things are very, not only sometimes like stigmatizing, but also it's very expensive already. But what people are proposing is that this universal basic income can get rid of it and basically make it more efficient. Okay, but yeah, we've talked about these like UBI alone, but I want to kind of like pose a question: what will happen if this UBI and tech happen at the same time? So think of it this way, like during Deacon Shao's presentation about personalization, we've seen how YouTube and all the ads and commercial companies like these like tech guys, right? Like how they strive so hard to get you addicted, how hard they strive in order to sell their products. And I think Easy mentioned a really good point during that time, and she's mentioned about reinforced I guess learning. Was it learning? Reinforced learning, right? So what you continuously see based on like what other people like of your age and income or gender like looks at, you continue to see it, and you have a free money every month, and with that money, these tech giants, like people who are at the top of the company, like they're not stupid. Like when they know that you are getting free money, they will dig into it in order to like get that money, right? And there's a good evidence about this. Like what happened during the time spent, or when we look at the time spent during the lockdown, you see a spike. It's not even like a steady increase, it's like a spike. This was the first COVID-19 death, and around this time was the start of lockdown. And when there's a lockdown, people use Facebook, watch crazy amount of Netflix, and they watch YouTube. And I'm very guilty of this. But like it's not just that. Twitch TV, TikTok, and obviously ESPN had a decline, but there was barely any sports events, anyways. But what we see here is that when they're locked down, and I'm assuming it's probably the same population of people who will be staying home because they have no jobs, right? What we do is not something more creative, as David mentioned. We dig into something that can be replaced by something else. And when tech giants know that you're getting free money, what they're gonna do is using ads, commercials, recommendations, personalization of big data, all the tools that they have, they will get you down, basically. And I wanted us to kind of like think about it, not just like UBI by itself, but what are the impacts? Like what kind of people are we gonna be? Like when we continue to indulge ourselves in the tech with the free money without having to work, which gives purpose in life, if you think about it, to many people. When they're unemployed and they have free money and they're home, and there are all these technologies that are available to you in front of you, what kind of decisions are we going to make, and what kind of human beings are we going to become when we continue to indulge ourselves in this? So that's the end of my lecture, and thank you. And I have questions for us to quickly talk about. So in 1 Corinthians 12:4-6 says that the Lord has assigned different kinds of gifts to each of us. As a result, it seems to be the case that market forces provide earthly reward and income based on our gifts and talents, thereby creating inequality. Is it necessarily a bad thing? Why do you think God assigned unique sets of spiritual gifts?
I think like the Bible, it never said like it acknowledged slavery. It acknowledged it basically acknowledged inequality, but it gave a different model for how the people of the covenant were supposed to respond and live their lives, in spite of that government or what the society deemed was right or not right. I think that holds true here. I don't think. I mean, let's be honest. There's a reason why God made man and woman. Like he made us to be different, and I would say individuals, as Kita mentioned, all men are not created equal. They are inherently different in some intrinsic ways. I don't think that's bad. I think the government is trying to do something, and maybe UBI or whatever that solution is, that earthly reward, it should probably be targeted at those that are most at risk. Because I think most middle class people, if they got that money, they would just rent a more expensive place or buy a better car. Like I think that's where it would go to. But if there are people that absolutely need it, I agree, they'd probably use it. My takeaway from this is I as a business person, as a church officer, as somebody that's a part of this community, I take this as a challenge. I feel like it's a failure of the church, and you know our verse is Acts 2:42, but right after that it says they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Why can't it be the church, as God reveals that answer of the economy of light to them? Why can't it be the church that supports folks that are in need? Why can't it be the church to do that? Because that was the biblical model in the first century church. That's the model that God gave us. The people of Acts didn't go to the government and ask for UBI. They basically gave themselves and came together. So that's one of my takeaways. One of my resolutions from this. The government should do what it should do, but I feel like it's a calling to us to step up and see if we can actualize some aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think I pretty much agree with Eddie. The inequality, you know, like the early church people, they didn't go to, you know, the government and ask for money, you know, like I think God allows those, and particularly for us is to shift our focus away from focusing on the inequality itself, but really seek God, you know, like be content with what they are given. Like just like, hey, you know, I can be earning 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, but as long as my neighbor is earning more than me, I'm not gonna feel equal and all that, you know. The spiritual state is for us to, you know, no matter what class you are, to focus all your purpose to God. And I think you know, people are given unique sets of spiritual gifts, different stages, different starting point, but that's okay, because you know God has His own way and God has His own time schedule for each one of us. So when we think that way, then we focus everything on God and not on the inequality. But again, there are people who absolutely will need it, people at risk. Those people, you know, should also be taken care of. But I'm just saying, like, the God allowing inequality to happen is also having its own purpose, and that's my take on it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the talents in Matthew 25. Like God gives different talents to different people. Like some people to 5 talents, some people 2, some people 1. But it really doesn't matter how much you get. It matters. What matters is what you do with it, with the gift that God assigned, right? So I personally think inequality, as you've mentioned, is something that cannot be eradicated unless we're in the kingdom of heaven. Like only in the kingdom of God, that where Eddie mentioned, and where when the Holy Spirit really took place and it came upon these people of the early church, then they were able to have the heart to sell their possessions and really share with everyone. Yeah, it looks like a socialist community, but not really, because they had possessions. There was a property was recognized, and it's not. I don't think it's like a sin to be rich. And Bible talks a lot about money, and Bible talks about a lot of like rich people, how hard it is to go to the heaven as a rich man, or it can be materialistically rich. It can be like rich in other aspects, but what really matters is, like as Xiao said, like what we and Eddie said, like what do we do with it? Do we really do it to expand God's kingdom, or are we using this in a way to kind of like be lazy and gain even more materialistic gains and things like that?
One thing I wanted to add to the discussion is that I think the question as a result, it seems that the market, like earthly reward, is based on gifts and talents, thereby creating inequality. So I am not sure whether gifts and talents in it itself creates inequality, but rather the demand for gifts and talents makes the inequality. So in like if you turn this question around, it seems that this your reward is based on your gifts and talents in itself. But earthly rewards, like the salary that we get, it doesn't really equate to the gifts and talents that we have. So for example, teachers, let's compare teachers to CEOs. Who has more talents? And so in terms of this inequality, I think the inequality is created by the supply and demand, and if there is more demand and there's less supply, it's more inclined to that person, the labor is going to get paid more. And I think that's why us evangelists has given this only uniqueness and recreation that like if you use a term from the economy, you say market fit. So even if you do the same manual labor, because you are given that spiritual summit gift, so you're given that uniqueness, and you find that one person who could be helped with your gift, and then with that one person, behind that one person, there's 10 people who has the same issue or the problem that they're trying to solve, and that's how you have uniqueness and recreation. So what I was trying to get is like the question itself, like the gifts and talents does not create the inequality, but rather they supply and demand, and also that's why God has given us the uniqueness, the spirit in our like life in us, that even if we do the same thing, the same thing, because we have that spiritual gift, we could find that only in that, and find that one person that we could help to evangelize, and behind that one person there's 10 people who could be evangelized. So I don't know whether that makes like sense.
Yeah, by no means I was trying to equate that like the gifts and talents that God gave us equates to inequality. I was saying like God made, as you said, like God made us very unique, like every one of us unique, like even like being able to hard work, you know, even like patience, even these like personality traits, these are, if you consider them as gifts, like for instance, some person like God made someone to be a teacher, like really gave one person like a ability to teach and really speak and convey the concepts. But some people were given like athletic abilities, and these things, and even in between those like layers, like people are different, you know, even among teachers and even among football players, and that's what I was trying to say, like these like different gifts of like how much people are endowed, it creates, I guess, differences in terms of earthly reward, right? So that's right. I totally agree. I think yeah, like using the uniqueness that God has given to us and really finding that 10 or one person who we can help, and that's definitely something we should remember.
And I think, can you guys see me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. For me, like, I think it's inequality. It's unequal in the worldly standard, but I think it's equal in God's standard. We are, because, I mean, like, yeah, as the First Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4-6, and then God gave us the each like the talent, the gift to each of us. So, but it means like, I mean, like God, He created us with His own image. So like every people, like if we truly restore our image, and every people, when every the non-believers and they see us, and they might feel, oh, this is how God looks like. So I think like if our talent and gift is used, be used to like the showing like the glory, and then give the glory to God, and then everything is to God. And then I think, yeah, I mean like 이게 한국말로는 정리가 됐는데, yeah. But anyways, yeah, that's.
Say it in Korean. Say it in Korean.
Okay. 그러니까
translate for Izzy.
Okay. Sorry, Izzy. 그러니까 일단 정말 이 하나님이 주신 탤런트와 이것은 결국 하나님을 표현하기 위해서 저에게 주신 것 같아요. 그래서 결국은 하나님께서 우리를 하나님의 형상대로 만드셨고, 그러니까 결국은 그 이제 은사 중에서도 교사가 있었고, 뭐 사도도 있고, 가르치는 자고 있고, 그리고 이제 뭐 상담 카운셀러도 있고. 근데 사실은 이게 다 하나님에게서부터 나온 거잖아요. 어떻게 보면 교사도 하나님 우리 보혜사 성령을 가르치시고, 그리고 또 어떻게 보면은 패션 디자이너도 하나님께서 처음 우리 가죽옷을 입혀주셨고, 그리고 사이언티스트도 사실은 하나님께서 처음에 인간을 창조하실 때 마치 갈비뼈 빼는 것도 어떻게 보면 마치 잠을 재운 다음에 이렇게 아담의 갈비뼈를 떼서 한 것처럼, 거기에서 또 마치 약이 나온 것처럼, 그러니까 모든 이 달란트들이 결국 하나님으로부터 온 것을 알고서 그걸 누려야만 우리가 같이 하나님의 나라를 이루고 그 안에서 하나가 되는 건데, 자꾸 세상의 기준에서 뭔가 나를 위해서라고 이렇게 쓰다 보니까 inequality가 되는 것 같아요. 그래서 네, 결국은 진짜 그 기준이 어디 있느냐에 따라 결국 보이는 기준을 따라가면 당연히 다 같을 수가 없고, 왜냐면 지금 이거는 돈의 기준에 대해서 되는 거잖아요. 그러니까 보이는 거에 기준이 되니까 자꾸 내 달란트가 돈으로 뭔가 기준이 나눠지지만, 복음 안에서는 사실은 요셉도 자기가 달란트가 있었고 정말 어떻게 보면 남들보다 조금 더 뛰어난 능력도 있었지만 애굽을 보내신 이유가 다른 사람을 구원하기 위해서 자기를 먼저 보내셨다. 그러니까 자기가 먼저 받은 이 기프트가 결국은 복음을 위해서라고 하는 것처럼, 결국은 이게 그러면 그 안에서도 같은 아까 에디슨이 말했던 사도행전 2장 43절부터의 그 경제가 그때부터 회복이 되는 것 같아서, 네, 세상의 기준은 항상 같을 수가 없다. 그게 제 생각입니다.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to respond to what June just said, because I completely agree with him. And just for everybody's reminder, Kita's lecture was focused on the economic impact of all these other technologies that we basically reviewed, and that's the reason why there's this huge focus on income inequality. Because the way I view this is there's two ways of viewing it. One is a flow of the world, and this is the flow of the world. This is what is taking place, and this is real, and it's leading towards a disaster. But as June mentioned, there's a flow of the word as well. And so if I go back to question number one, knowing what the impact is of these fourth IR technologies on the economic and income inequality, and kind of marrying it with, I think, some of the concepts that Jay was trying to bring to the forefront, the talents, the God-given talents that I've been given, how can I use that to block these disasters, right? Or how can I use that to potentially remedy this? That's a question that I just realize that I need to ask myself, and I feel like it's a relevant question for all of us, because this is the flow of the world, and as long as we are in the flow of the word, we've been called to stand up and fight against this. So
Definitely.
I wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think that was the point that I was trying to get at, actually. I think we were created in the image of God, and we have fallen. And because we were fallen, Genesis 3:6-11 enters in, and we view everything based on my own understanding, like worldly standards and success-centered standards. So even and I don't think church is an exception. Like even within church, like we're so used to thinking like, oh, that guy's like smarter. Oh, that guy or that woman, that person is richer, or this person is like that. Like that person wears better clothes. And I'm not saying like people here are susceptible of this, but then I personally, like based on my experience, it was pretty prevalent. And I think it really goes back to really reflecting back on like what my standard of viewing this world is, and what is God, how is God looking at the world. And I think the reason why God gave us different gifts, my personal opinion, is that it is to expand His kingdom and realize how great He is. Regardless of how much we have, how little we have, God always shows Himself through the talents or through the gifts or through everyday life, through the Word. So I think, as Eddie said, like I think it's a very relevant question for me as well to always reflect on like where is my standard of viewing things, of people around me, so, and also of the world. Is there any more comments about number one?
Yeah, so a short comment. Listening to all of that, all of you guys talking just remind me of another verse. That's 2 Thessalonians 3:10, the famous verse, "The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat." So having the talent is one question. The second question is that, yeah, as we have mentioned, direction of we are using the talent. And the third is that human will that allows us, or that human will of wanting to use that talent according to that direction. And we all have so many experiences of our life of being idle, even though we know the talent, even though we know the direction. And I actually believe that the state of idleness, or even further listlessness and other mental state that affects the willpower to begin the working process, will become one of the like serious factors that will affect human behavior itself with the advancement of the technology and the economic or political policies following after that. So like if we have all the technologies, and if we have the universal income or any other stuffs like that work as a social safe net, will people be willing to combat the idleness and use their talent in any other ways? Like, will we become like Wall-E, just sitting on a couch and just moving on the?
Yeah, I mean that's quite a segue to number 3, like question number 3. So Chanyoung mentioned about idleness, and people are with the advancement of technology and also the UBI. Like when people have free money and have tech giants trying to reach into your pockets through ads or personalization of data, what problems could be caused? And as people of the covenant, how should we live so that we don't fall victim of it? And how can we help susceptible young remnants? Because like I think during one of our discussions, somebody mentioned about like a baby, like kind of zooming in the picture, like thinking that it's a tablet. Like it's really the reality that kids grow up, and young remnants will be susceptible to this because they think this is the only reality that they experienced. So like let's first talk about like what kind of problems could it cause. I think Chanyoung mentioned part of it, and how can we live? How should we live so that we don't fall victim of it? And how can we help susceptible young remnants?
Cut off the internet.
Oh, was it cut off?
No, I said cut off the internet.
That's the solution. His solution is cut off the internet.
No internet until you're in high school. That works.
I'll share a short perspective. I feel like, and I shared this before, and this can be controversial, and people can disagree with me. And if you do, let's have a discussion. But I think all this technology that's out there, we should leverage it. And so don't let the technology be used to leverage us and influence our states, but rather, because it's like the Amish, right? The Amish are like, oh my God, like electricity, that's from Satan. Like you guys are like totally captured by Satan, right? And like, oh, you drive a car, that's from Satan, and you're totally enslaved by Satan. But no, I feel like what we need to teach and relay to the remnants is what's going on now. It's been going on for thousands of years, right? It's going back to Genesis. These objects that man created, there were objects that God allowed us to create and to use and to leverage for the furtherance of His kingdom. But because of our states, we took the objects and made idols of them, and we were enslaved by them, and it's always happened. So I feel like, yeah, okay, I'll be honest. My daughter, I try to limit how much internet interaction she has, but I think the key is not to just cut things off, but to train the remnant's vessels, and it goes back to I think Yura's forum today to train our vessels to see the flow of the world, and then not to be enslaved, but rather leverage that for the purpose of the kingdom. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I agree with Eddie. I think it's all depending on how we help like our own spiritual state and remnant's spiritual state. Like if we are spiritually aware and the remnants are aware, then they will not fall in victim. Instead, they will become like a new opportunity from God. Like what Eddie said, it's leverage. And, just I think what we should focus on to answer your number 3 is really just to, show them this is how the world has been, evolving over all these, like 1,000 years. Be spiritually aware and don't fall into the trap, right? Not like deny everything, but see what God has prepared for you in here, like in this very world. So I think that's the only solution, to help the remnants.
And that connects back to the today's word we heard from the business worship, being how we help remnants to be rooted in the gospel, so they will be able to make the choices above the common sense or above the being a right or wrong. Maybe, and that itself, if we can train that decision making, or how to say that, if we just if we just train the remnants to be rooted deeply in the covenants, so they will make the decisions not by their logic or common sense, but purely by the covenant, that will become a serious leverage against the other parts of the world. Because, as we have mentioned, other kids, other people are just like, they don't have choice but to just be drowned by the flow of the world, flow of the technology in the world. Just by being able to swim against that current is a huge leverage. But still, I wish there could be a more kind of specific method, because I mean, we cannot leave those kids of unbelievers just to like be swiped away. We should have pity for them.
Yeah. Actually, I agree with all of you guys' idea, especially Eddie's idea. Like we have to leverage the technology in order to spread the religious gospel. So like, for example, the Martin Luther, like when he was translated the Bible into the own language, and then at the moment the Gutenberg he got it, like created the printer. So God used that technology to spread out this like the Bible to the around the world, so that so I think this is the really good also the good opportunity for us to teach the remnant first that I think they really need to have their own like the gospel standard, like Christ-centered standard, to see everything the recreated in everything in recreation. So I think that's the important thing. And then actually, thankfully that Aaron's here, and then I really want to like hear like his like the opinion regarding this.
Ooh.
Yeah, so like he's the remnants, and then he's in like I think he's really in the middle of this the situation. So yeah, I mean, like if you're okay, like could you share your form regarding the number 3?
Me?
Yes.
I don't really know what to say. Yeah, I guess what we talked about can be bad. Like technology can like affect greatly negatively as well. Because I was watching this. There's this CEO of an electric company, and his son committed suicide because he had anger issues playing games, and he's only 12 years old. So it says over here, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4 to 6, the different gifts and those kind of stuff like talents. It can be a bad thing, because I guess it can be a bad thing. The child was really good at Fortnite, but then when he lost several games, he would like rage and get mad and physically do bad things. So yeah, that's my opinion. I don't really know what to say.
That's okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I had one quick question. Quick point to what Kite mentioned prior to the slide about the tech giants will tap into our wallets, like tap into our finances, like utilize this time to tap into our market, and that's really what they're doing. And even for me, I get emails from Sephora. So they have 20% discount because nobody's buying stuff now. Nobody wants to buy, makeup, who's going out. But they had 20%, and also other company like Sisley Paris, that's also a cosmetic company, and they never have discount, but all of a sudden they have 20-30% discount, and that's like their first discount of their entire history. And for me, I just want to buy it. I wanted to own this product for a very long time, but I try to resist it, and thankfully the sale ended. So thankfully, while I was contemplating, the sale ended. So thank God. And I think, just as Daniel, he something Chanyeong also mentioned, just as Daniel, it wasn't a special prayer for him. It was as he did before, and just as he has always done, he just prayed. So I think as people of the covenant, something Eddie mentioned, the vessel of the offering, having that offering view of, my first portion is always that offering, and so rest of it, how will I use it? It's not something. This is like the situation that I didn't it's not like it's a situation I didn't encounter before COVID-19. I always encounter that, they're having sale. So what should I do? Oh, I want this, but I think that kind of trained me as well. And so, the temptation is even greater because you're always on media, you're always on a screen. But I think God's built up that vessel as well. So I think that how can we help susceptible young remnants is that, just as Daniel resolved early on, even before all these crises happened, that having that right offering view is definitely the blessing, and that we can relate.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're living in a society where it's not us thinking what we want, what we choose. It's the technology that dictates how we should choose and how we should behave. And I think, as Jay mentioned, it's so important to have that resolution as Daniel did, and really live a life according to it. And that's why I want to share. So I think it's been a year or two, but Jaehee, Chanyeong, Gloria, and I were meeting in Colombia just to discuss about the economy of light using Rehoboth curriculum. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us. I think it's a really good opportunity to see biblically what God says about money and how we should live as Christians. So if you guys are interested, we would like to share it with you guys so that you guys can read over it and meditate on yourself. We can either distribute it through email, or if you are weekly email, during the YBOM, or we can send you individually. So yeah, expect that. That's a gift from us. And yeah, anything else?
Maybe I want to share my personal story that before I came to United States, that is 8 years ago, and at the time my life is falling down, and I decided to drop the school, and I told to my parents that I want to go to factory to work. And actually my parents decided to send me to abroad to learning language and culture, and widen up my decision and make a better person. But at that time, as you know, I was really failed. And my father told me that before he sent me to USA, that what he told me that is, son, I send you to abroad because I'm not trust you, but I trust God who are with you always. I think that belief, my father's belief, is a really strong. Still, I remember that, and I believe because of his faith, I'm able to meet Jesus, and I believe that because of his faith, I can overcome all the hardship in the Christ and the power of the Spirit. So I think for the remnant, we need to have a belief for not for the remnant, but the God who is with them. And because my father showed his belief as a witness, actually that changed my life. Yeah, it's more stronger than the word to showing our faith in Jesus Christ to remnant. I think that is the one way we can teach the remnant and grow up as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Maybe.
Amen.
Amen.
I have one thing. Sorry, David. Sorry, no, you. Like as something for the remnants, like I don't want our remnants to be unquestioning. Like it's so hard to hold like a critical stance when they live in a world, like when they're living inside this world and they're constantly seeing, reading, and hearing, especially things from like powerful or smart people. It's hard to like, and so I think it's like it requires vigilant guard over their spiritual state and their judgment and discernment. And so I think what they need is like a really strong filtering system with the word, so that they can hold like critical stance over everything they're constantly exposed to, because they're always going to be exposed to it for like the rest of their life.
Definitely. I think someone else wanted to share. No.
Yeah, me. I totally agree with Gloria. Actually, it was like in the same line. In our pulpit message, we've been talking about like our identity. And I feel like all the things that we confront in this world come down to knowing who you are. And like right now, we're maybe like tempted by technology, but in a different time can be like something else, and probably before was something different. And when you know who you are, you start like building relationships with things that are outside of you in certain ways. And I feel like that's how we can like leverage and use technology and not let technology use us, but only when we're clear where we're standing. And I feel that that's like a gift, and it's something that we know and some other people don't. But we also have to like make the work of really being filled by the word, so that can like come out of us and other people can taste it. And when they're feeling like lonely or confused or tempted by technology or dragged into this world, they can ask you like, hey, how are you like surviving right now? So we can always be like this opportunity for someone that is seeking, because I feel like all of this, like inequality and poverty and crimes, it's ultimately talking about like the spiritual state of society. And of course, God is allowing this to happen for us to see physically how hard it is to live without Him.
Right.
So I guess like there's like a challenge, but also like a responsibility that comes with it to not be swept away, because if it's not us here, like who?
Definitely.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, I think as long as we really remember who we are, as Easy said, and really resolve so that we don't defile ourselves with food, king's food and wine, and remnants will automatically see that. And because Wonbin Hyung's dad, like it was the same thing. Like he really not only like spoke with like words, but he really like acted with his faith and showed him like how what kind of resolution he's making in his daily life and his faith. So, and that really transferred into his life. So I think it's a really another good reminder that it's so important for us to remind ourselves who we are. So I think we can go to the quickly second. I think it's mostly answered. What do you guys think? Like, I think this is pretty much answered by you guys as we were conversing. What do you guys think? Is there any more opinion about this?
정적 문제, bro.
It is.
Right.
I want to second what Izzy said, and as it relates to question 2, like Big Dog from the pulpit, he said this many times, and like people have said this throughout history as well. But being broke is like it's a physical state. Being broke, right? I might not have a dollar in my pocket. It's just a physical state. But being poor is a mental state, and Pastor, you talked about that as well when he talks about like our spiritual states, and so I feel like UBI can solve my physical state of being broke, and if you're broke, it could be temporary. If you get a job, you can resolve that. But I think that core issue, that core state of being poor, not just in a economic sense, but I think being captivated by a different spirit, and Chanya touches upon this as well, like idleness. I think that's the frame that we need to challenge against and ideally break. I think that's what it cannot solve. It cannot solve that core fundamental problem, which everybody's already highlighted.
Amen. And also, I believe that UBI can maybe could be somehow lessen the equality within one country, but I wonder if what will happen on a global scale. I mean, there's no guarantee that UBI will be accepted in all countries, and all countries will use the policy to solve their situation. So, if, for example, USA will apply the universal income policy, it will affect the economy of other countries, definitely. It's just inevitable. And maybe just outsource their part of the problem to other countries to solve. So, and then it will I guess it will also create another vicious circle, like outsourcing problems of the rich countries to other countries, and they will also like share or split their problems to other countries as well. It maybe it could become just like a blocking one credit card with another credit card.
Yeah, these are very good points raised. Anyone has any opinion about that?
I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier today. I mean, I know that chasing after money, I've committed crimes and I've hurt people, and but the one thing that it couldn't solve was having that emptiness in my soul being filled. And I think it doesn't matter, what type of solutions there are to the economy if people don't seek God's kingdom. It's people are always going to try to fill that hole with something else. So.
Okay. So I think oh my, it's already 2 hours.
Oh sure.
Okay. So it's my last topic. Should I save this for last class? Like just quickly go over it like next week, and then go in like transition into the spiritual state, or do you guys next week, right?
Yeah, next week should be good.
Okay, I think so I was going to watch a video, and that's it, but I think it's already almost like 12. So thank you so much for all the participation today. I think I've learned so much from you guys. Next week, I'm going to quickly talk about the cashless society. And I actually invited June to quickly speak about maybe, like based on the flow of the word, and the young business people, what as young business people, what should we grab hold onto, and what should we envision, like in spiritual, I guess, contribution. So like I asked Pastor June, Assistant Pastor June. So yeah, expect them. Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you for the lecture.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Could you share the link for the video you wanted to share on our Kakao chat?
No, I want to watch it together next week.
He's cheating.
Yeah, book previews, man.
See you guys.
Okay, I was thinking.
Hold on.
See ya.
Bye.
Hey guys, next week I think is the intensive training, isn't it?
Is it?
Right. It's the 16th. So, but we could, we last time when we had it, it wasn't a problem having the fourth IR.
Oh, yeah. We'll finish in like an hour, and yeah, we'll try our best to finish in an hour. Yeah, it won't be. Oh, thank you for
Thank you
for
reminding.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.